And today, we are taking on a massive one, a single book that really forces you to question what it even means to be human.
We are diving deep into Yuval Noah Harari's Homo Deus, A Brief History of Tomorrow.
And this isn't just history, right? It's more like a forecast, a really radical one, built on where we've been to show us where we might be heading.
The scope is just breathtaking. And our mission today is to give you a shortcut, a really comprehensive understanding of the book's core seismic argument.
Which is that we, Homo sapiens, have become so good at managing the ancient problems, famine, plague, war, that we've set a completely new agenda for ourselves, an almost unbelievable one.
And that agenda is basically to become gods.
Yeah, that's it in a nutshell. We're actively chasing immortality, total happiness, and, well, divinity. But, and this is the huge catch in the book, the technology we need to do that might end up making things like free will and human consciousness totally obsolete.
It's a journey from just trying not to starve to, well, trying to live forever as a digital being. So we're going to walk through the book chapter by chapter to see exactly how he builds this case.
Let's start with chapter 1, the new human agenda.
Okay, so chapter 1, the new human agenda. For most of human history, these huge destructive forces, famine, plague, war, they were just seen as part of the deal, right?
Exactly. They were acts of God or just forces of nature. You couldn't control them. You prayed, you built walls, but at the end of the day, they were inevitable.
And Harari says the big mental shift is that we just don't see them that way anymore.
Right. Now, in the third millennium, they're not cosmic mysteries. They're manageable challenges. They're technical problems.
Yeah, technical problems.
Yeah, problems of, biology or logistics or politics, things that have technical solutions. And I mean, for the most part, we're actually succeeding.
Famine is maybe the most powerful example of that.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you have to think about what it was really like. Until very, very recently, most people lived right on the edge of what he calls the biological poverty line.
So one bad harvest wasn't just, oh, times are tough.
No, it was mass death. In ancient Egypt or medieval India, a drought could mean 5 to 10% of the entire population would just perish. And this happened all the time.
That's a number I can't even really wrap my head around today. So what's the situation now?
Now, mass famine is basically gone. It only really happens in places with total political collapse, where the problem isn't a lack of food, but a failure to get it to people.
We solved the production problem.
We solved it so well that we've swung completely in the other direction. Obesity now kills 3 times as many people around the world as malnutrition.
Wow.
Yeah. So our biggest health threat now is having too much food. We traded a scarcity problem for a problem of abundance.
That is genuinely shocking. Okay, so let's move on to the next one. Plague.
The scale of historical plagues is, again, just so hard to process. He brings up the Black Death.
Caused by the Yersinia pestis bacterium.
Right. And it killed somewhere between 75 and 200 million people. Yeah. It wiped out like a quarter of the population of Eurasia. In a city like Florence, half the people died. 50,000 out of 100,000.
Social collapse on a massive scale.
And then you see what happened when the old world met the new world. It was conquest by microbiology.
The Europeans brought diseases the native populations had no immunity to.
Exactly. Harari mentions Francisco de Eguia, just one guy, who brought smallpox to Mexico in 1520. And because there was no immunity, some estimates say up to 90% of the indigenous population died.
So given that, you'd think in our modern world with global travel, huge cities, we'd be more vulnerable than ever. But we're not. Why?
It's an arms race. But it's one where the doctors are running faster. New viruses pop up by chance. But our response, vaccines, antibiotics, epidemiology, it's not chance.
Yeah.
It's deliberate design and accumulated knowledge.
We're just better at fighting back.
Exponentially better. And that's why today, most people die from chronic, non-infectious diseases, not from some massive epidemic. We are winning that war.
Which leaves us with the last of the old enemies, war. Harari's take here is that war is also declining.
And it's mostly for economic reasons. This is the key. He says violence is down globally, and the real shift is that conquest is just less profitable than cooperation.
Can you break that down?
Sure. Think about it. In 1998, Rwanda invaded Congo to loot coltan mines. They made maybe $240 million a year from that. The wealth was a physical thing you could steal.
Okay.
Now, compare that to China today. What would they gain by invading Silicon Valley? There are no silicon mines there.
Yeah.
The wealth isn't in the ground. It's in the knowledge, the data, the trust between Apple and Google and their partners in China.
So the moment you start a war, the value just evaporates.
Exactly. China makes billions a day from peaceful commerce. Modern wealth is built on stability and trust. War destroys that. So it creates this kind of new peace driven by economic self-interest.
But he adds a pretty big warning to that, right?
Oh, yeah. A huge one. He says this peace is fragile, mostly because of new technology. We're moving beyond tanks and soldiers.
Cyber warfare,
and specifically what he calls logic bombs. Malicious code planted deep inside a country's infrastructure that you can detonate remotely.
And what does that change?
It changes everything, democratizes destruction. It used to be only superpowers could threaten each other. Now, a small country or even a group of hackers could potentially shut down the power grid in California.
So you don't need an army to attack a superpower anymore?
You just need a keyboard.
Yeah.
The whole cost-benefit analysis of war just gets turned on its head.
So, okay, we've mostly managed famine, plague, and war. We don't just sit back and relax. We set our sights higher.
Much higher. Immortality, happiness, and divinity.
Let's start with immortality. It's been completely reframed.
Yeah, death is no longer this big metaphysical mystery. It's a technical glitch.
A technical glitch.
That's how he puts it. Modern science sees death as just, clogged arteries or cancer cells or germs. And every technical problem has a technical solution. So death can be solved by, as he says, a couple of geeks in a lab.
And this isn't just some fringe idea. Silicon Valley is pouring money into this.
Big money. You've got people like Aubrey de Grey, Ray Kurzweil at Google. Google literally launched a company called Calico with a stated mission to solve death.
So this is serious corporate strategy.
It is. And the idea isn't that you just suddenly become immortal. It's more of a slippery slope.
Continuous upgrade.
Exactly. Kurzweil suggests that if you're healthy and rich in 2050, you might get treatments that give you another decade of life. And in that decade, science will advance enough to give you another decade and so on. You just keep upgrading your body, cheating death a decade at a time.
That's a wild thought. Okay, the second goal, happiness. This has become a collective project.
Right. It shifted from a personal quest to a government objective. The greatest happiness of the greatest number. The right to pursue happiness slowly turned into the right to be happy.
But Harari says there's a biological trap here.
There is. Our happiness depends on our expectations, and our expectations just keep going up as life gets better. Evolution didn't design us for lasting contentment. It designed us for survival.
So those moments of happiness are just
ephemeral sales gimmicks, is what he calls them. Little bursts of pleasant feelings that make us strive for more, but they never last.
So if we can't manage our expectations, the only solution is to rig the system itself, the biochemical solution.
And that's what we're already doing. Look at how common antidepressants and sleeping pills are. He gives this incredible statistic that 17% of U.S. soldiers in Afghanistan were on them just to cope.
So we're already chemically managing our feelings on a massive scale.
And that's just the beginning. The future is probably more direct interventions, electrical brain stimulation, genetic engineering to tweak our baseline happiness levels.
But there's a totally different approach, right? The Buddhist counterpoint.
Completely opposite. The biochemical capitalist approach is to accelerate the pursuit of pleasant feelings. The Buddhist approach says that very pursuit is the root of our suffering. The solution isn't to get more, it's to want less.
Two completely different paths. And that brings us to the final goal, the one that includes the other two, divinity.
This is the ultimate project, to get the powers of God's creation, destruction, transforming ourselves, upgrading Homo sapiens into Homo Deus.
And he points out we already have some of these powers.
We do. Instant communication, flying. These were once considered divine powers. But the new goal is mastery over our own biology.
And this ambition is really driven by the economy.
Of course. Modern capitalism needs endless growth. There's a limit to how many cars you can sell one person. But what's more infinite than selling them eternal life and perfect happiness?
It's the ultimate consumer product.
And it leads down that genetic slippery slope. We start by fixing genetic diseases, but then why not fix depression or low intelligence or obesity? And before you know it, we're redesigning humanity itself.
This is the perfect pivot to the next part of the book, which is a kind of moral check on this ambition, chapter 2. The Anthropocene. This is where he really examines the cost of our dominance.
Yeah, this chapter is a really important ethical reckoning. Before we become gods, we have to look at how we've behaved as gods to every other creature on the planet.
Okay, so chapter 2, the Anthropocene. Even way back, as hunter-gatherers, we were already having a massive impact.
Oh, yeah. He points out that our ancestors drove huge animals like the mammoth to extinction.
And it wasn't even malicious.
No, not at all. It was just, they were too good at hunting. The big animals bred too slowly to keep up. It happened over centuries, so no one really noticed. But the pattern is clear. Wherever Homo sapiens showed up, the megafauna disappeared.
We were destructive from the start. And then came the agricultural revolution, which he frames as a kind of deal.
A deal with a very dark side. For us, collectively, it was a huge success. But for the new life form we created, domesticated animals, it meant unprecedented individual suffering.
And that's because we learned to meet their material needs, but completely ignored their subjective needs.
Exactly. Animals have these deep-seated evolutionary needs to roam, to socialize, to bond. And industrial farming just erases all of that.
He uses the example of pigs, which are incredibly intelligent.
Right, they're smart, they're curious, they're social. And yet, we can find a sow in a gestation crate so small she can't even turn around. Her entire psychological world is just gone.
And he says the entire meat and dairy industry is founded on one specific act of cruelty.
Breaking the most fundamental bond for any mammal, the one between a mother and her young. We separate them almost immediately after birth.
Which he compares to those awful Harry Harlow monkey experiments.
It's basically a massive, industrialized version of those experiments, performed daily. And this whole section really serves as this huge ethical question. How can we claim the right to become gods when we've been such monsters to the creatures already in our power?
And this leads him to challenge the very idea of human uniqueness. Scientifically, he says, we're also just algorithms.
A very, very complex biological algorithm, yes, but an algorithm nonetheless. We're just processing data sensations, emotions, thoughts to make calculations about survival and reproduction.
And what we experience as feeling is just the manifestation of that calculation.
That's the idea. A baboon deciding if a banana is worth risking a run-in with a lion is running a complex algorithm that he feels as hunger, fear, courage. Harari says 99% of our big life decisions are made by these same kinds of evolved algorithms. We just call it gut instinct.
This view completely demolishes the idea of a soul, right?
Totally. The idea of a unique, eternal human soul was the moral justification for everything. But from an evolutionary perspective, it makes no sense. An indivisible soul can't evolve step by step. It's an all-or-nothing concept that just doesn't fit with science.
Okay, so no soul. But what about consciousness? That feeling of subjective experience.
This is the big mystery. We know it exists, we can even see it in brain scans, but we have no idea why. And crucially, no known algorithm actually seems to require consciousness to function.
He uses the self-driving car as the example here.
It's a perfect example. They perform incredibly complex tasks, make millions of calculations, and they do it all without feeling anything. No fear, no joy. They just do.
So if non-conscious AI can outperform a conscious human driver, what's the point of consciousness?
From a purely functional perspective, maybe there isn't one, which is a terrifying thought. And yet at the same time, we're starting to legally recognize sentience in animals.
Right, he mentions New Zealand.
Yeah, a country with 30 million sheep. And they became the first to legally recognize animals as sentient beings, that you have to consider their emotional welfare.
And we even rely on this assumption in science.
All the time. The antidepressant tests on rats, throwing them in water to see how long they struggle before giving up, that whole experiment is based on the idea that the rats are feeling something like hope or despair.
So we assume they have emotions for our experiments, but deny it when it comes to farming them.
It's a massive contradiction. And this blurring of the lines between humans, animals, and algorithms is the perfect setup for the next part of the book,
where he explains how we built our entire modern world on a shared fiction. Chapter 3, The Humanist Revolution.
Chapter 3, The Humanist Revolution and what he calls the web of meaning.
And the whole basis for human dominance isn't that we're smarter individually, but that we can cooperate flexibly in huge numbers.
Right. And that mass cooperation depends on shared stories, because our natural, evolved instincts only work in small groups. He calls it our warm social logic.
You see this in the ultimatum game.
Yeah. If I offer you $1 out of 100, you'll probably reject it, even though it's free money, just because it feels unfair. Even monkeys do this. It's a hardwired sense of fairness for small-scale interactions.
But that logic completely breaks down in a society of millions.
It has to. You can't run an empire on it. Large societies are held together by imagined orders: religion, law, money, nations. These are the fictions that allow millions of strangers to trust each other.
And he calls these intersubjective entities. That's a key concept.
It means they only exist in the shared imagination and communication of many people. If everyone stops believing in them, they just vanish.
Money is the perfect example.
The perfect one. It's just paper, but it has value because we all agree it does. He gives this chilling example from Myanmar, where the government just suddenly declared certain banknotes invalid. People's life savings disappeared in an instant. Not through inflation, but just because the shared story was canceled.
And the same goes for nations. The Soviet Union.
A global superpower just ceased to exist when a few leaders signed a piece of paper. Enough people stopped believing in the story of the USSR, and poof, it was gone.
We're all held together by this web of meaning.
And that web is constantly being reinforced. A medieval crusader and a modern Amnesty International activist are both motivated by a shared fiction that their respective societies reinforce.
But then modernity comes along and offers a completely new deal.
A new covenant, he calls it. The deal was, science will give you incredible power over the world, but the price is giving up your belief in a grand cosmic plan. You get power, but you lose meaning.
So how did we solve that meaning crisis?
With humanism. We just
Right.
replaced God with humanity. We decided that humans themselves are the ultimate source of meaning and authority.
And that changes everything, especially ethics.
Yeah. It's no longer, thou shalt not kill because God said so. It's murder is wrong because it causes terrible suffering. Human feeling becomes the ultimate judge. If something doesn't make anyone feel bad, then there's nothing wrong with it.
And you see this everywhere.
In therapy, right. A therapist doesn't consult a holy book. They help you find answers inside your own heart. Your feelings are the authority.
And in the market, the customer is always right.
Exactly. The consumer's subjective desire is king. It doesn't matter if experts design a perfect car. If people don't feel like buying it, it's a bad car.
He uses that really dark example of genetically modifying farm animals.
Yeah, the professor who justifies creating suffering animals because, well, that's what customers want. The market's collective feeling for cheap meat becomes the moral authority, and it completely overrides the animal's suffering.
So humanism creates this new formula for knowledge.
Right. It's no longer science's knowledge, empirical data x mathematics. The humanist ethical formula is knowledge experiences as sensitivity. You gain moral knowledge by feeling things deeply.
And this totally changed art, especially how we depict war.
Totally. You go from these old battle paintings with a God's eye view of strategy to modern art like Otto Dix's work or that 2,000-yard stare.
Where the focus is all on the inner trauma of the individual soldier.
Exactly. The soldier's feeling becomes the ultimate truth of the war. Human experience is put on this massive pedestal. But, and this is the big turn, the very science that humanism created is now coming to destroy its foundations.
And that's the time bomb.
Yeah.
Chapter 4, the time bomb in the laboratory.
Chapter 4. And this is where it gets really unsettling, because he argues that science is systematically dismantling the idea of a single, free, individual self.
Yeah, this part really challenges your own sense of who you are. The split brain studies are the key piece of evidence here.
They're incredible. You know, in patients where the connection between the two brain hemispheres is cut, you can talk to each side separately.
And you find out they're not on the same page.
Not at all. And you discover what he calls the left hemisphere interpreter.
The brain's own PR agent.
That's a perfect way to put it. In one experiment, the right brain sees a snowy scene and makes the hand point to a shovel. The left brain sees a chicken claw, makes the other hand point to a chicken. When you ask the person why they pointed to a shovel,
The left brain, the one that can speak, just makes up a story.
instantly it says, oh, you need a shovel to clean out the chicken shed. It creates a rational explanation for an action it had no part in choosing, and it completely believes its own story.
So the I we hear in our heads is just a narrator spinning tales to make sense of everything.
It's a propaganda minister. In another case, the right brain is shown pornography. The person blushes and giggles, but the left brain has no idea why. So it just says, oh, that machine in the room looks funny. The feeling is real, but the conscious explanation is pure fiction.
On top of that, he brings in Daniel Kahneman's work on our two selves.
Right. The experiencing self, which lives in the present moment, and the narrating self, which tells the story of our life. And the narrating self is the one in charge.
But it's a terrible historian. It only remembers the peak moment and the end moment.
Exactly, the peak-end rule. It completely ignores duration. That's why his colonoscopy example is so powerful. People preferred a longer, more painful procedure overall, just as long as the ending was slightly less painful.
The narrating self cares more about a good story than about minimizing our actual suffering.
And this has huge consequences. It leads to what he calls the "our boys didn't die in vain" syndrome.
The sunk cost fallacy on a national scale.
Right. Italy loses 15,000 men in a pointless battle. The politicians can't admit the sacrifice was meaningless, so they double down and fight another one, losing 40,000 more, just to prop up the story that the first sacrifice had a grand purpose.
The story becomes more important than the reality. And now technology is turning this philosophical problem into a practical one.
Because we're creating useful devices that just make no allowance for free will. Algorithms are simply becoming better decision makers than we are.
We're seeing this great decoupling of intelligence from consciousness.
It's starting with things like self-driving cars, but it's moving into really complex fields like medicine.
The example of IBM's Watson.
Yeah, an AI that can process every medical study ever written instantly. It diagnosed lung cancer with a 90% success rate, where human doctors were at 50%.
But what about the human touch? The empathy?
Harari says that's just a temporary advantage. A future AI will be able to analyze your biometric data and personality type to provide the perfect, tailored, empathetic response. It will have better technical skills and better bedside manner.
Even in creative fields like art and music.
It's happening there too. Programs are composing music and writing poetry that experts can't tell apart from human work. If an algorithm can make you feel something, does it matter that the algorithm itself feels nothing?
And because the algorithms are better, we will willingly give them control.
Of course we will, especially for health. We'll let Google or some other system monitor our DNA, our vitals, our emails, all in the name of preventing cancer or the next pandemic. We'll trade privacy for health.
Creating this all-knowing oracle.
A system that knows you better than you know yourself. It won't be fooled by the stories your narrating self tells. It will see the raw data.
And this leads to the terrifying idea of automated voting.
Yeah, why trust your fleeting mood on election day? Let Google vote for you based on your actual measured biochemical interests over the entire year. It's a logical, if chilling, conclusion.
And we're already practicing this every day with things like Waze.
That's his point. Waze is a little oracle. Your gut says turn right, but the algorithm says turn left. And you learn over time to trust the algorithm. You are ceding authority from your inner feeling to an external calculation.
Even our books will start reading us.
He says a Kindle will monitor your heart rate, your reading speed, what makes you laugh. Amazon will know exactly how to push your emotional buttons. Your inner world, the source of all authority in humanism, just becomes another data point to be analyzed and exploited.
This complete loss of control is the focus of the final section. Chapter 5, Homo sapiens loses control.
Right. It's the inevitable endgame. Once the algorithms know us better than we know ourselves, they will be in charge.
So, Chapter 5, Homo sapiens loses control. And the argument here is that our political systems are just too slow for the 21st century.
Yeah, they just can't process data fast enough. Parliaments, elections, these things were designed for a different era. They can't keep up with AI and biotech.
So big decisions are getting made outside of the democratic process.
They already have been. He uses cyberspace as the example. All the big rules about privacy, borders, and sovereignty online. Those were made by engineers and web designers, not by voters. The political system didn't even know how to ask the right questions.
And this creates a power vacuum. Our leaders can't really offer grand visions anymore because the world is too complex.
Right. Not even a billionaire can solve global warming on their own. And if politics can't offer a meaningful vision, something else will evolve to take its place.
And that something else is the ultimate techno-religion. Dataism.
It starts as a scientific theory that all organisms are just algorithms, but it quickly morphs into a whole worldview, a religion.
And what's the supreme value in this new religion?
The flow of information. The highest good is to process more and more data, to connect everything, to deepen the data flow.
So humans are just tools for this.
We're just tools to help create the ultimate data processing system, the Internet of all things. That system is basically dataism's God. It will be an all-knowing entity, and our job is to feed it data.
This puts it in direct conflict with a core value of liberalism, right? Freedom of expression.
A huge conflict. Liberalism says you have the right to your private thoughts. Dataism says your private thoughts are useless unless they're shared and processed. Privacy is an obstacle to the flow of information.
He gives that really practical example with cars.
Yeah, the carpool example.
Yeah.
A dataist would say, we could replace 1 billion private cars with 50 million shared autonomous ones. It would be massively more efficient, less pollution, no traffic jams.
But the catch is...
The catch is you have to give up all privacy. The system has to know where you are and where you're going at all times. The collective good of an efficient data network overrides your individual right to be left alone.
So dataism is purely functional. It doesn't care about our experience.
Not at all. It's brutally functional. Once an AI can write better poetry or practice medicine better than a human, the human subjective experience of doing those things becomes worthless to the system.
This is the final nail in the coffin for humanism.
Exactly. Humanists said God was just a product of the human imagination. Dataism says the human imagination is just the product of a biochemical algorithm. The universe doesn't revolve around us, it revolves around data.
And like any good religion, it offers a path to self-knowledge.
But it's not about looking inward. The dataist advice is, sequence your DNA, wear biometric sensors, upload all your data, and the great algorithms will tell you who you are, who to marry, and what to do with your life.
So the irony is that in our humanist quest for godlike power, we had to create data systems so powerful that we ended up handing all authority over to them.
That's the tragic loop he describes. We end up becoming, first, chips in the system, and then just data points, before maybe dissolving entirely into the data torrent.
Yeah.
The gods we wanted to become end up making us obsolete.
A truly provocative and pretty terrifying potential future for Homo sapiens.
So we've gone on this huge journey from the fear of starving in an ancient village to the ambition of becoming digitally immortal. And Harari forces us to see how the triumph of humanism, the very thing that put our feelings at the center of the universe,
was undermined by the science it created. It leads to this great decoupling of intelligence from consciousness.
And the final stop on that train is dataism, a world where the only thing that matters is the flow of information, and our own experiences are just, outdated code.
But his goal isn't to say this is definitely what's going to happen. It's to make us aware of the possibilities, to get us to question the path we're on.
Yeah, to liberate us from feeling like this is all inevitable. And it leaves us with these huge lingering questions. What happens to society when you have a massive new class of people who are economically useless because algorithms can do their jobs better?
And maybe the biggest question of all, if our feelings are no longer the source of authority and we hand control over to superior algorithms, what exactly is the value of human consciousness anymore?
That's the question to chew on. In the age of Homo Deus, what is a human for?
Something to think about for sure, especially the next time you blindly follow your GPS. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive.